My name is Kale Voss, and I want to tell you the strangest thing that ever happened to me. It did not happen on a battlefield, and it did not happen in some grand control room full of important people. It happened in a small, quiet, broken pod at the edge of a minefield, in a place most people never visit. I was a salvage runner. That means I looked for things other people had lost, dropped, or left behind in space. I worked in an area called the Perimeter. It was a strip of empty systems between human space and the territory of a group of alien species called the Threshold Choir. The Choir was powerful. Long ago, they decided that humans were too unpredictable to be trusted. They did not attack us. They simply built a wall of ships and rules around us, and told us to stay small. For many years, we did. Life on the Perimeter was hard, but I liked it. I liked flying my old ship through quiet systems, looking for pods, broken satellites, and drifting cargo that had fallen through the cracks of bigger, more important stories. Most days, I found nothing but scrap metal and old wires. But one day, everything changed. I found a cargo pod that did not belong to any human ship. It was smooth, silver, and marked with symbols I did not understand. It had drifted into a minefield left over from an old border dispute, and it looked like it had cracked open a little on one side. I should have left it alone. Every rule I knew told me to leave it alone, but I had never been very good at following that kind of advice. I moved my ship in carefully, avoiding the mines the way I had learned to do over many years, and I brought the pod inside. When I opened it, I found something small curled up in the center, wrapped in soft padding. At first, I thought it was some kind of machine. Then it moved, and I understood it was alive. It looked like a small dragon from an old fairy tale. Its scales were the color of wet stone, and its wings were folded close to its body, thin and soft like wet paper. Its eyes were too big for its head, the way a puppy's eyes sometimes are. It looked up at me, and it made a small sound, like a kettle just starting to whistle. I did not know what it was. I would later learn that its true name was too long and strange for me to say properly, so I simply called it a baby dragon, because that is what it looked like to me. The choir called creatures like this Eric hatchlings. They were rare, and they were kept only by important families among the choir. I did not know any of this yet. All I knew was that I was holding something small and frightened, and it began to cry. Its tears were not like human tears. They were thick, and they seemed to glow very faintly, like a candle behind thin paper. One drop landed on my wrist, where my glove had torn during the salvage. I expected it to hurt. It did not. It felt warm, like stepping into a bath after being cold for a long time. Then something strange happened inside my head. It is hard to explain in simple words, but I will try. It felt like a door that had always been shut inside my mind, suddenly opened just a little. For a moment, I saw shapes and patterns that did not belong to any language I knew. Then, everything went dark, and I lost my senses completely. When I woke up, the little dragon was sleeping quietly in my arms, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. I felt different, though I could not say exactly how. It was only a few minutes later, when I tried to fly my ship out of the minefield, that I understood. I could feel the mines, not see them with my eyes, and not detect them with my ship's instruments, but feel them, the way you feel a cold breeze on your skin before you see the leaves moving. In my mind, I could sense a soft, humming pattern, like a quiet song, made of many small notes. Somehow, without trying, I understood exactly where each mine was, and how to avoid it. I flew my ship out of that dangerous area without a single mistake, and I had barely touched the controls with my full attention. Part of me was steering on instinct, guided by something new inside me. That was the first time I understood something powerful had happened. I did not know yet how big it would become. I brought the baby dragon back with me to Haldane Station, a small research and trading post at the edge of human space. The people there were surprised, and a little afraid, when they saw what I had brought back. Some of them wanted to send it away immediately, worried that the choir would come looking for it. Others were curious. A few scientists on the station asked if they could study it gently, without hurting it. I agreed, but only if they were careful and kind, because by then, I already felt something close to responsibility for the little creature. Over the next few weeks, we learned more. The scientists found that something inside my brain had changed. They called it by many complicated names, but the simplest way to explain it is this. Every human brain has a hidden part that is usually silent, doing nothing at all. My hidden part had woken up, and it seemed to wake up only after direct contact with the tears of a baby Eric dragon. At first, I was worried something was wrong with me. Instead, the scientists found that I had become more aware of certain kinds of information around me. I could sense the mood of people from small sounds in their voice, even if their words tried to hide their feelings. I could notice patterns in machines and signals that used to seem like random noise. It was as if my senses had become sharper, not louder, but clearer, like turning up the sharpness on an old photograph. The baby dragon grew slowly during this time. She stayed close to me, resting on my shoulder or sleeping near my bed. I began to call her Wisp because she moved so lightly and quietly, almost like a piece of smoke drifting through the air. She trusted me completely, and in a strange way, I trusted her too, even though I still did not fully understand what she was or what she meant for my future. Word began to spread quietly across the perimeter. It turned out I was not the only human this had happened to. Over the years, a small number of salvagers, traders, and even a few soldiers had found similar creatures, mostly lost or abandoned during old border conflicts with the Choir. Each of them had touched the tears of a baby dragon at some point, and each of them had experienced the same quiet awakening inside their mind. None of us had planned this. None of us had asked for hidden power. We were simply people who found something small, hurt, and alone, and chose to help it instead of walking away. The scientists at Haldane Station worked carefully, and slowly, we began to understand more. It seemed that humans carried something they called latent resonance thinking, a very old and deeply hidden trait buried far beneath ordinary thought. It could not be woken up by machines or by force. It could only be woken by a gentle, natural bond with an Eric hatchling, formed through care and closeness, not through control. This explained something important. The Choir had studied humanity long before the wall was built around us. They must have discovered this hidden trait centuries ago, and it must have frightened them deeply, because instead of trying to understand it, they chose to lock us away from anything that could wake it up. They kept Eric hatchlings only among their most trusted families, protected and controlled, and made sure ordinary humans never got close to one. They had not expected a lost salvager to find a broken pod drifting through a minefield. About 6 weeks after I found Wisp, a ship from the Choir arrived at the edge of Haldane's system. It was a large, quiet vessel, built with smooth, curved lines that seemed almost gentle compared to the sharp military ships I had seen before. A message came through our old communication systems, translated by a small drone that hovered just above the station's landing platform. The message was simple. It said that something valuable belonging to the Choir had been found among us, and it must be returned immediately. By this time, Wisp had grown much bigger. She was no longer small enough to sit in my palm. She could now wrap gently around my shoulders like a soft scarf, and her wings had grown strong enough to lift her a short distance off the ground. She still trusted me completely, and she still looked at me the way she had the very first day, with those same large, curious eyes. I walked out onto the landing platform to meet the drone, with Wisp resting quietly around my shoulders. My heart was beating fast, but I tried to stay calm. The drone repeated its message. It said the creature must be returned, because she belonged to an important bloodline among the Choir, and her presence among humans was dangerous for reasons I was not fully told. I thought about everything that had happened since that day in the minefield. I thought about the quiet weeks when Wisp slept beside me, trusting me completely, needing my care to survive. I thought about the strange and beautiful part of my mind that had woken up because of her tears, and how that awakening was not something forced upon me, but something given freely, through simple kindness. I looked at the drone and said, as clearly as I could, that Wisp was not property to be returned. She was family. I told them that whatever fear had caused them to lock this power away for so long, they could not simply take back the bond that had already been formed between us. I do not know if the drone translated my words perfectly, but the ship did not attack. It stayed silent for a long moment, hovering quietly above the station, almost as if it was thinking. Then, without any further message, it turned and disappeared into the dark space beyond our system. It took nearly 3 years before we understood why they left without a fight. During that time, more of us who had bonded with young Eric dragons began working together. We shared what we had learned, and slowly, carefully, we found a way to speak directly with a few members of the choir who were willing to listen instead of only giving orders. Through these quiet talks, we finally learned the true reason behind their old fear. Long before the wall was built, one of their own scholars had written a private report about humanity. In simple words, the report said something like this: humans do not need to be taught how to care for something small and helpless. They already know how, deep inside, without any lessons. That instinct, the scholar warned, was the true danger, not the power itself, but what humans would be willing to do to protect anyone or anything they had chosen to love. That single warning, hidden away in an old file for centuries, had shaped an entire wall of distance and fear between two peoples. The choir had not been afraid of weapons or armies. They had been afraid of kindness, and where it might lead once it found something worth protecting. When I finally heard this explanation, I understood something important about myself, about Wisp, and about every other person who had gone through the same quiet change. We had not become powerful because someone gave us a weapon. We had become powerful because we chose to care for something small and frightened instead of walking away from it. Wisp continued to grow over the following months. She became strong enough to fly short distances on her own, though she always returned to rest beside me at the end of the day. The bond between us never faded. If anything, it became steadier and calmer, like a quiet friendship that no longer needed constant proving. The talks between humans and the choir slowly changed as well. It became clear that many of their fears had been built on old assumptions, some of them centuries old, never properly tested or questioned. Slowly, carefully, both sides began to consider a future where the wall between us might soften, piece by piece, instead of remaining forever locked in place. I do not know exactly what the future holds for humanity, for the choir, or for creatures like Wisp. I only know what I have learned from this experience. Sometimes the greatest changes in life do not come from grand plans or powerful weapons. Sometimes they come from a single small moment, a torn glove, a crying creature nobody else wanted, and a simple choice to stay instead of walking away. Wisp still rests on my shoulder most evenings, watching the stars quietly beside me. I often think about that day in the minefield, and how close I came to leaving that pod untouched. If I had turned my ship around that day, none of this would have happened. I would still be a simple salvager, drifting quietly through empty systems, never knowing what small acts of kindness can awaken, both in ancient hidden powers and in the future, between two very different peoples learning, slowly, to trust one another again.